was going to be tough. This is why he never ran in a Democratic primary in New York City. He avoided that. That was the tougher challenge to be mayor of New York. He ran in Republican primary instead. He's also quite aware of the 12th Amendment and why that makes an independent run for president so impractical. You need a majority of electors. You can't run as an independent and be the best of the three, because if no one has a majority of electors, it goes to the House. And state delegations, all states equal in the House, which is very unusual, will decide the president. Currently, the Republican Party has 26 state delegations in the House. So even if he ran independent, was the best of three, it'd still go to the House. They select Trump. So he was always reluctant doing a Democratic primary. He knew that, and this could have played different. The money he spent was working. He was rising in the polls fast. I think he did make a mistake to do that debate before Nevada. He was under relentless attack. That could have been predicted. He wasn't even on the ballot in Nevada. He might have had a good reason to avoid that. And then in the debate before South Carolina, everyone was attacking Sanders, not Biden. And in fact, Biden had a very simple week. People weren't attacking him, and people made up their mind, a lot of them on last-minute Super Tuesday. He did very well, very impressive Super Tuesday, but he's still a weak candidate. Good week for Biden, good week for Trump.
Okay, I want to go back to something you said, because you talked about, if there is not a majority, that it goes to the House. And you and I discussed this, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, this issue, and about the 26 House delegations. And we got a bunch of emails from people saying, wait a minute, if the House chooses, Trump loses because the House is held by the Democrats. Explain that a little bit more thoroughly for folks that went, no, he's wrong.
Well, the professor's not wrong in this case. I've been wrong other times. But, the USA is actually not a democracy or republic. Constitutionally, it's a union, and state equality is a very important principle in unions. And the 12th Amendment says that on this occasion, when the selection of a president falls to the House, all states are equal in the House. All states have one vote in the House. So if we look at the current House, the Democrats have more representatives, 234, and thus they have a majority of representatives in the House. But when all states have to rally around one vote, when all 53 representatives from California only have one vote, and you break it down, Republicans currently have the 26 most representatives out of 26 states. Democrats have the most out of 22 states, and then there's 2 states with even delegations. Now, it is true that the House that would select the president in this scenario is the House that will be elected this cycle, not the current House, because the House is inaugurated before the president. But it looks to me like the Republicans will hold their control of 26 House delegations.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that, because like I said, I got swamped with emails, people going, no! That said, really, I mean, you can say whatever you want to about Michael Bloomberg, and he is past tense. Going forward, I think the more interesting question is, in terms of the Democrats, Elizabeth Warren, what she decides to do, whether stay in or bail. And the question is, who would she support? Because there seems to be some animosity for a number of reasons between her and Bernie Sanders, who philosophically seems a lot closer to her than Joe Biden. But it makes you wonder, okay, is she going to be pragmatic and say, I think Joe Biden has a better chance to win, so I would throw my support behind him? Or would she be more ideological and say, even though I don't like him, I agree more with Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I think she had come down to maybe being a unifier at a brokered convention. You imagine the Sanders people would have trouble rallying around a Biden or a Bloomberg, and she's someone closer to the establishment that the Sanders people could support. But that's a pretty far-fetched scenario right now with Bloomberg dropping out. pressure is going to be on her to withdraw from this race. She did break 15% in 5 states, but in the other 9 states where she didn't break 15%, yeah, those are votes that may lean towards Bernie and are not being counted towards the delegate allocation. So, yeah, I think pressure is on her to drop. It turns out, she's 70 years old, and it turns out that's pretty young for presidential candidates nowadays. So in 4 years, she'll be a young 74, so she may want to run again. She may want to inherit the Bernie energy. She's in a good position to do so. So my hunch would be, yes, she's going to drop out. Yes, she would maybe endorse Bernie. Maybe she endorses nobody. But, yeah, I think she'd want to keep her campaign viable in 4 years from now and not spoil any chance that Bernie's got competing here.
Well, you made an interesting comment just there. Support Sanders or not support anybody. You don't think that her supporting Biden is really an option, it sounds like, or a consideration, more appropriately?
Well, I think being from Massachusetts, and you're right, being someone that's kind of seen as on the left-turn edge of the party, I think her shot at a movement is to have those Sanders people on board. And I don't think if she dropped out, endorsed Biden, and there's 1,000 people supporting Biden, I don't think that's going to set her up to be in a special position 4 years from now. But if she endorses Sanders, she's in a special position to start with a real base there if she were to make another run.
All right. Let's say that she drops out because obviously, as we've discussed, because philosophically they're kind of on the same page. She's drawing votes away from Sanders in the primaries. If she were to drop out now, what's the horse race look like going forward between Biden and Sanders?
Well, you'd have to make Biden the favorite there just because he's got a lot of he had a great Super Tuesday. He's got the establishment momentum, and there's a real resistance between Sanders being the nominee. He's an avowed socialist. He's technically independent of the party, and there's a lot of people in the party that just don't want to go that direction. But I've never been big on Biden as a candidate. I think he's gaffe-prone, and he had a great week there where he wasn't under attack, but Sanders is now going to attack him. I mean, it's going to make for an interesting race. We have Michigan coming up. That's a very big state. Sanders won 4 of the upcoming 6 states last time, but he barely won Michigan. And so Biden's going to have to go in there and perform. But I think Sanders being the nominee is still far-fetched. He's just very edge of the party. I don't think the party wants to go in the socialist direction. And for all their calls for a national popular vote to get rid of the Electoral College and do a national popular vote for president, they certainly don't do that in their own primary, right? They're doing a whole complex delegate system and the convention, and they'll be able to help control that better.
Well, the X factor, or at least it keeps being brought up as the X factor, is the young voters who seem to be much more inclined to vote for Sanders than Biden. Does that decrease if Biden becomes the nominee? Does that decrease the turnout, do you think, coming up during the general election in November?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Biden is going to have exceptional turnout. He's certainly not going to be able to match what Obama was able to do in terms of turnout. I think Trump's a pretty solid favorite against Joe Biden. So, yeah, I mean, you'd try to put together a ticket. You'd have a VP candidate that may fill whatever gaps you have. But, yeah, I mean, I don't see him matching a record turnout that was set by Obama on the Democratic side.
You do this for a living. And by the way, Dr. Nathaniel Cogley joining us, head of Department of Government at Tarleton State University. You do this for a living. Has anybody ever been able to quantify how much difference a vice president really makes in terms of people's voting decision, other than maybe, as in the case with JFK and Lyndon Johnson, being able to pick up a state like Texas? Other than a strategic state choice, does it really make that much difference in people's minds?
Well, I think it can have a difference, one, like you say, a swing state, but also with a certain demographic group. We see that Trump, has shored up his evangelical support with Mike Pence. I think that was very important. And, if we're headed to a campaign where it's a 77-year-old against a 73-year-old, VP selections actually become a little more important. You may plausibly have a president there as life expectancy for males in the U.S. is 78. So, you're pushing some lines there. But you're right. It only tends to move it a few percentage points, assuming it's not a really horrible choice. Like Dan Quayle, people didn't have confidence in that choice much. It may have hurt Bush Sr. and his reelection chances. But I do think it matters. It's just it's outweighed by the presidential nominees. But I think a few percentage points, it can affect that.
All right. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us on the Wake Up Call.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, you take care. Dr. Nathaniel Cogley on the Wake Up Call. It is 7:53 News Radio 1120 KPNW.